Okay, I'd like to give you a small little quiz, if you could. Now, I want you all to try and follow me. You don't have to say this out loud, just say it in your mind. All right, choose a number from 1 to 10. Any number from 1 to 10. Okay, got it? Multiply that number by 9. Now, apart from the number 1, it should give you 2 digits. If you've got the number 1, you would have 9, that is fine. But if you've got 2 digits, add the 2 digits together. Add the 2 separate digits that you have as an answer together. All right, so if you got, for example, 54, you're adding 5 plus 4. Now, subtract 5 from that total. Okay, subtract 5 from that total. Now, if you got that, you've added the 2 digits, you minus 5. The letter A or the alphabet A equals 1, the alphabet B equals 2. So what alphabet is your number? All right, think of a country that starts with that alphabet. Think of a country that starts with that alphabet. And now the second letter of that country, the second alphabet of that country. Think of an animal that begins with that letter. Now, if all of you were following me completely throughout, I'm wondering, why on earth were you thinking about elephants in Denmark? Okay, EQ versus IQ, emotional quotient versus intelligence quotients. All right, when we talk about these two things, we need to first understand and have a common understanding of what we think is intelligence. All right, so what we think is intelligence. Now, what is it? Now, by society standards, today, we recognize intelligence as people that have analytical reasoning. They're able to come up, analyze the situation, and come up with a rationale. We also recognize intelligence as verbal skills. When a person speaks well, he or she looks or seems intelligent by their ability to have attention, keep attention, able to maintain attention, and the memory. Now, our school system still heavily relies on regurgitation of facts, your memory. If you've got a great memory, you do well in our school system. And lastly, judgment. Having the ability to look at any situation and make a judgment call that is right. Okay, make a judgment call that is right. So by society standards, this is how intelligence is seen or measured. Now, apart from that, sometimes also speed comes into play, problem solving, and flexibility. So, what is IQ? It is intelligence quotient, or another way of calling it, book smart or natural brain power. Usually graded and evaluated on an IQ ability. Some of you may or may not know this. If you take an IQ test and your score is below 70, you are a danger to yourself and society. If you score between 71 to 90, you're slightly below average. If you score between 90 to 110, you are average. If you score between 111 to 130, you are above average. All right. If you score above 140, you are in the genius category. Now, big myth is the lower your IQ, the less success you have. Well, that's not true. All right, that's not true. IQ is a weak predictor for achievement, for job performance or success, and for overall wealth, happiness, and success. It isn't a good predictor. It does not depend upon your IQ. Okay, let me go through now EQ so that we understand and have the same common understanding. EQ is known as your emotional quotient. It is also the same as EI, which is emotional intelligence. All right, another way of coining it would be your emotional intelligence. Now, these three other factors are part of emotional intelligence. Your social intelligence, whether you are street smart and whether you are people smart. These three things, social intelligence, street smart, people smart, are all part of EQ. All right? Now, if we look at the 5 components, we look at the 5 components of EQ. They are self-awareness, being aware of yourself, motivation of yourself and of others, your social skills, your ability to empathize with others, and regulating yourself, being in control of your emotion. Those are the 5 main areas. Now, what experts say today, psychologists, psychiatrists, management consultants, medical doctors, they have shown that emotional intelligence is responsible for the way we behave, how we feel, how we relate to others, and how well we do our jobs. And yes, even how healthy we are. Our emotional intelligence actually affects our physical health. So again, self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, motivation, and social skills. All right? Now, the fact is, in the studies that have been done, all right, studies that have been done, it's proven to show that IQ is only responsible for 20%. 80% of your success is due to EQ, not IQ. So that should make us think again. Now, Daniel Goleman, the person that actually coined the term EQ, said this: in a very real sense, we have 2 minds, one that thinks and one that feels. All right, one that thinks and one that feels. So for me to make it simple, whether it's 5, everything, I just want y'all to remember Sammy. All right? If you think about emotional intelligence, think about the word Sammy. It's about social awareness, being aware of others, how they feel, how they're responding, being aware, socially aware of others. Self-awareness, understanding yourself, understanding why you're feeling what you are feeling. All right? Motivation, how you motivate yourself and how you motivate others. And lastly, influence, the ability to influence people and get things moving in the direction you want them to. So when we look at these things, we will come to realize that IQ today can get you hired. IQ can get you hired. If you look up the newspaper on the classified ads, or you look up online, etc., almost every job will specify that they want a diploma, a degree, and they will specify, even some will put down their honors, they want this, they want that. So your IQ can get you the interview and can get you hired. But your EQ will decide on whether you are promoted or fired. Let me share a true story with you. I used to travel quite a bit before pandemic, and I used to go to the airport, and one of my favorite pastimes of being at the airport was going to the bookstore to kill time. When I went to the bookstore, I thought I saw a friend of mine, but I thought for a second, can't be. Now, I am, and I have always been, a C+ average student. Now, there's a group in school of students that I went with who were the A students, the ones that were at the top of the class every year without fail. And the person I thought I saw at this bookshop at the airport was an A student, but he was wearing the uniform of that bookstore. And this is several years after graduating. And I knew this person in primary school, in secondary school, in pre-university, and in university. And he was in the top 5 every year throughout his entire school education. So it seemed to me unbelievable that that would be this person, Kenneth. But I leaned over to look at his name tag, and I saw his name tag, and it said Kenneth and his last name, and it was the same person. So I tried my luck. I said, Kenneth, and he turned, looked at me, and immediately said my name, Leslie Chowdhury. Don't forget, IQ, good memory. So I looked at him and I wanted to engage with him. He says, I'm sorry, I can't talk. And he immediately left, went into the storeroom, shut the door behind him, and did not reappear. Now, when I got back from my trip, I called up a friend who was in that A student group, and I said, I saw Kenneth working at this bookstore. How can that be? And that person said, that would make it Kenneth's 6th job for this year. And we were in the month of October. And I said, why? He says, Leslie, he can't get along with anyone. He can't get along with bosses. He can't get along with colleagues. He can't get along with customers. He has been fired from every job. Been fired from every job. So, in a study that 80 PhDs, people with permanent head damage, says that social and emotional abilities are 4 times more important than IQ in establishing professional success. Now, you might say to yourself, well, I'm a student. How does that affect me? Well, at the end of the day, when you are, as a student, getting along with your lecturers, getting along with your professors, getting along with your classmates, your colleagues on projects, getting along with people is still fundamental to your success as a student. All right, so it still has pertinence. It still has pertinence. So coming back again, your success in life comes back down to your relationship skills, your ability to understand yourself, your ability to manage your emotions, your ability to understand other people, and your decision making, your responsible decision making as a result of being in control of your emotions. Now, what are employers looking for? What are employers looking for? Employers today are looking for listening and oral skills. Apart from whatever results you have, whatever degrees, diplomas you have, they're looking for listening and oral skills. But the funny part about this is nowhere in primary, secondary, pre-university, poly, or even in the university is there any subject matter on listening. They're also looking for adaptability, positive responses to any setbacks and obstacles. They're looking for people that know how to manage, know how to motivate themselves towards goals and taking pride in accomplishments. They're looking for people that can effectively, interpersonally work together and manage conflict. And they're looking for leadership initiative, people that take the first step, so to speak. All right, so when we talk about these things, these are what they're looking for. Now we come back to the first one, which is listening. So I'm going to give you a test right now. The test is very simple. I'm going to read out a simple paragraph, two simple paragraphs. I want you to listen very carefully and think on the answer. All right, it's a very simple riddle. Think on the answer. Now hear me out very, very carefully. George Smith was murdered on Sunday evening. There were 5 people, other people in the house at the time of his murder. His wife, his personal chef, a butler, a housemaid, and a gardener. All right, and a gardener. The police questioned them to find out what they were doing at the time of the murder. With their answers, the police immediately knew who the murderer was. His wife said she was reading a book at the fireplace. His personal chef said he was cooking his breakfast. The butler was giving instructions to the vendors on the phone. The housemaid was cleaning the bathroom, and the gardener was in the greenhouse. Who murdered George Smith? If you listen carefully to that story, you would know it was his chef. Why? Very simple. My first line was George Smith was murdered on Sunday evening. The chef said he was cooking breakfast. All right, so listening skills is fundamental to EQ. Now, emotional intelligence, according to Daniel Goleman, the rules of work have changed. We're being judged on a new yardstick, not on how smart we are or our expertise, but on how well we handle each other and ourselves. That's the new yardstick. That's the new yardstick of how we are being judged. Now, many of you will recall on social media, newspapers, Facebook, and a whole bunch of things, this episode where the CEO of SPH and a reporter clashed. All right, they clashed. And the fact is, in EQ, your ability to handle frustrations, your ability to manage your own emotions and manage your social skills dealing with other people is fundamental to your success. Is fundamental to your success. All right? And the CEO basically took out his temper onto the reporter who asked the question and said, I take umbrage with that, and it became a joke throughout Singapore. If you look at his body language, if you look at the way he has approached it, his tone of voice, everything in that situation, it got him in trouble. Now, even the law minister, K. Shanmugam, said the journalist asked the right question, and it was fair. Mr. Ng's reaction was very unfortunate. So you be the judge. EQ, high or low? In this particular situation, we all know the answer. But the fact is, Mr. Ng definitely is a man of high IQ. EQ let him down. EQ let him down. Before you say something to someone, always think about how you'd feel if someone told you the same thing. Right? Someone told you the same thing. High EQ has a positive attitude. Now, many of you have seen this example, you've seen this picture, you said, do you see the glass half empty or half full? The point is not whether you see it as half empty or half full. The point is you have a glass. EQ understands that. You have the opportunity to fill the glass. That is what we're talking about. Now, I want to highlight a letter that was sent to Albert Einstein on his application. This is your application for doctorate has not been successful at this time. As such, you are not eligible for the position of associate professor. While you posed an interesting theory in your article published in Annales de Physique, we feel that your conclusions about the nature of light and the fundamental connection between space and time are somewhat radical, and overall, we find your assumption to be more artistic than actual physics. This was sent to Albert Einstein. Now, Albert Einstein, everyone here will know high IQ, but also high EQ, because he didn't allow this setback to knock him down. All right? He didn't allow this setback. He went on from there. All right? So what matters most in EQ is how you see yourself. Because in life, many people are going to say things to you. Many people are going to criticize you. Many people are going to not be very encouraging. So what matters most is how you see yourself. Do you see yourself as a pussycat, or do you see yourself as a lion? That is what matters. So when you talk about EQ, we're talking about the ability to recognize emotions in yourself, the ability to manage those emotions, the ability to recognize how another person is feeling, being able to relate to that person and respond to the person to get a positive influence. That's what we're talking about in terms of EQ. Another example, which everyone will be aware of because it hit the news, it was out in social media, the infamous Amos E. Everyone that knew him will attest high IQ, a very intelligent person. Now, he left Singapore, went on to the US, asked for asylum, etc. And we read in the news recently, he has been charged, all right, in court right now. And again, the area of error is his inability to understand how to behave and how to react in society. So he has been sent to prison. All right? I love this particular cartoon. Yes, I think I have good people skills. What kind of an idiot question is that? The question is, how do we react with people? All right? There is always personal competence and social competence. Self-awareness, understanding your own internal preferences, understanding your own resources, your intuitions, regulating them, and motivating yourself to get the kind of outcome that you want to get, right? That you want to get. Now, when we talk about managing emotions, we're talking about the full gamut of emotions, understanding frustration, sadness, joy, excitement, managing them in such a manner that it is acceptable, in such a manner that people embrace you, in such a manner that society is all right with it. So let's examine EQ and success. EQ and success. Understand that your own feelings and emotions, all right, are fundamental, but you cannot be blinded by your emotions. And understand that the emotions of other people are key in working with them. 99% of all decisions are not made on rationale, but are made on emotions. So we need to understand how important emotions is. Another incident that everyone would be aware of, again, it hit the news, all right? Here we have a safe distancing ambassador approaching somebody that refused to wear a face mask, all right? And instead of reacting to the safe distancing ambassador's question, the famous line that has been again made fun of was, "Show me your badge." Show me your badge. It was an antagonizing challenge back to the ambassador, and it then proceeded into a law case, a court case, and again, it proceeded into a farce, and it was not pretty. Why? Because she could not control her emotions. Now, there is no question about her intellect. There's no question about her intelligence level. Right? She was an officer in the Navy, and she is well-to-do. But when you're talking about how she reacted, how she controlled her emotions, how she responded to other people, we realize she fell short. She fell short. Daniel Goleman says, if you are tuned out of your own emotions, you will be poor at reading them in other people. So in other words, if you don't understand yourself, if you don't understand why you are feeling the way you are feeling, you're going to be very poor in understanding why that person is feeling the way they're feeling. Our key to understanding other people is also understanding ourselves. We have to understand our emotions. Now, EQ and success. The higher you go, the more EQ matters. The higher up the ladder you go, the more you need to have emotional intelligence. Because the ability to influence, communicate, lead, be a change catalyst, manage conflict, build bonds, collaborate, cooperate, motivate a team, all fundamentally require EQ. It needs EQ, right? Jack Ma said this, no matter how smart you are, if you don't know how to work with people, your dreams will just be dreams. If you don't know how to work with people, your dreams will just be dreams. Now, I don't pride myself as being a person of high IQ, even though tests say otherwise. But working with people has been something that I have worked on. And it is the one and the only reason why I formulate good relationships which have assisted my career, which have assisted my ability to perform, my ability to excel. All right, so developing empathy. Empathy is the ability to recognize another person's emotional state. All right, the ability to recognize another emotional state. Now, you can recognize another emotional state by hearing them, by seeing them, by hearing the intonation in their voices, whether they suddenly went high pitch or low pitch. All of these elements help. Seeing their body language, whether their shoulder is hunched over, whether their head is dropped, all of these help you recognize another person's emotional state. All right? Recognize another person's emotional state. Now, it is not difficult. Oops, sorry. Skip 2 slides. Okay, it is not difficult to recognize clear-cut emotion. If I show you these 5 pictures, every single one of you would recognize which one was frustrated, which one was angry, which one was excited, which one was frightened. You would recognize the emotional state. You would recognize the emotional state. Now, I love this particular cartoon. Do you mind if I strap your phone to my forehead so I can pretend you're looking at me when I talk? EQ considers how people will and do react to your words and your nonverbal actions. Now, we all know today the handphone is something that is glued to many people, but we need to be careful that it doesn't steal away the attention from people that are in front of us. Because if it does, we lose out on all the cues. We lose out on seeing what their body language is telling us. And we lose out on being able to control their emotions to that situation. Texting is a brilliant way to miscommunicate how you feel and misinterpret what other people mean. Great technology, but fantastic in the area of miscommunication. So, we talk about 10 habits of high EQ people. Number 1, they label their feelings rather than labeling people. They label their feelings rather than labeling people. Number 2, they distinguish between thoughts and feelings because they are different. I can think something and I can feel something, and they are both separate elements. They take responsibility for their feelings. They understand how to use their feelings to help them make decisions. And they show respect for other people's feelings. All right? They show respect for other people's feelings. Now, we'll continue with 6 onwards, but it isn't rocket science to realize that people who feel good about themselves, all right, function the best. When you feel bad, you don't function well. When you feel great, you function great. So it isn't rocket science, but we need to understand the power that emotions have on outcomes, on our outcome, on our performance, on our receptivity by others. It makes a difference. It makes a huge difference. I love this cartoon. You have a toothbrush saying, sometimes I feel I have the worst job in the world. And the toilet roll says, yeah, right. In life, we will always have people that are better off than us. We will also always have people that are not doing as well as us. Either spectrum of that doesn't matter. What matters is you have the ability, all right, to be your best, and you can change any circumstance that you are in. So the other 6 habits, they feel energized and they're not angry. People don't like dealing with people that are angry all the time. They like people that validate their feelings. People like people that give positive reactions, not negative. Ask anybody, who would you rather work with? Somebody that is negative or somebody that is positive? The answer is plain and simple. Don't be a person that criticizes, judges, and lectures others all the time. That's not a habit of a high EQ person. A person that finds something positive, finds some way to commend people, find something sincere to praise people about. And they avoid people that disrespect or invalidate them. All right? High EQ. And understand that influence, which is one of the things high EQ people want to do, that it involves all 3 areas. It starts with how you think, and that affects your attitude, and therefore affects your behavior. And your behavior reinforces your thinking, and it keeps going on in that manner. Okay, so the key to personal success today is influence, not authority. It is influence, not authority. Whether you're a student or whether you're in the working world. Let me share a story about my son, Zach. Zach came back home, and he had taken a test in school, and he got all of the answers correct, but he was given 0. And the reason he was given 0 was he put the answers on that test in pencil. And the teacher wanted to make a point that in the exams, they were required to use pen, and they should know that they should not have used pencil. So he and 5 other friends in class all got 0. And he came back and he was angry, and they confronted the teacher, and they basically said how ridiculous that was. How can you give me 0 when my answers essentially were all correct? But the teacher stood firm and he came home and he relayed that to me. And he wanted me to go in and lecture the teacher. So I initially agreed until my wife said, no, teach him what to do. So I called him back and said, I'm not going in with you. This is what you have to do. So I taught my son, and he went back the next day, saw his teacher, and started off by saying this. Teacher, I understand that you were trying to teach us. I apologize for my behavior. I apologize for being emotional and for hitting back in an inappropriate way. But I think you've made your point crystal clear. And because you have infinite wisdom, I know you will realize that all 5 of us in class that made the error of using pencils will never make that error again. And because you are so wise, I am sure you will do the right thing and give us the appropriate marks. That day, the teacher at the end of the day decided to award the proper marks to the students, and he came back elated and a hero. But the fact was, if he learns to control and learns to communicate, he can influence and get the results that he wants. The importance of EQ. 50% of our work satisfaction or our student satisfaction is determined by our relationship. Well, in school, it would be with their lecturers, and in the working world with their boss. The other 50% comes in dealing with co-workers or fellow students. All right, and in the workplace, it would be subordinates, suppliers, and customers. Notice that all of work satisfaction or study satisfaction has to do with dealing with another or with other individuals, with other human beings. So that's how important your EQ is. Now, knowing when to zip up is just as important as understanding the right thing to say. All right, sometimes it's not about saying anything, it's about not saying anything. Because at the end of the day, you need to understand there is a right way and there's a right timing to when you speak. So it's not what you say, it's how you say it. That's what makes the difference. That's what makes the difference. Your tone. If I stood in front of another colleague or person or somebody that mattered to me and I said, do you know that I really, really love you? Now, because of my tone, I don't think I will communicate love. All right? The attitude in which I do that, the pace, the pitch, the volume, all of these. It's not what I say, it's how I say it. People with good EQ know how to say what they want to say. So, I'm going to give you a challenge. This is the challenge. For everyone here, try saying only positive things to people, to every person that you interact with for 24 hours. And watch how different people are going to react to you. That's the challenge. Because if you can learn to do that and stretch it out from 24 hours to daily, you are going to be a raving success in life. So EQ and success, understanding your own emotions, understanding what motivates people, understand other people's points of view, understand how to handle team reaction. How to handle team reactions. Every day, the responsibility of plugging ourselves in or motivating ourselves is ours and ours alone. You cannot depend on your parents or your classmates or your lecturers or your bosses or other people to motivate yourself. You've got to learn to charge yourself up. And if you don't know how, this group that organized this talk has the answer. Talk to them and they will tell you what motivates them and how they get motivated on a daily basis and how they charge themselves up. Ships don't sink because of the water around them. Ships sink because of the water that gets in them. So don't let what is happening all around you, what people are saying, all right, to affect you, to get inside you and weigh you down. You need to learn to overcome obstacles, overcome hurdles, overcome things that seem like mountains. All right? Now, the fact is, the person you become is based on the books you read, the movies and music you watch and hear, the interactive video games you play. But the number one thing is you are influenced by the friends of the people you spend the majority of your time with. So, coming back again, and we're coming to a close. Sammy, social awareness, self-awareness, motivation of yourself and of others, and the ability to influence. That is what we're talking about. I want to share with you one thing that it took me a long time to understand. How you do anything will eventually become a habit and influence how you do everything. So if you do anything with excellence, it will become a habit and it will influence you and it will influence your success. It's not about having important tasks. It's not about having important things. It's about consistency and creating the right habit from the get-go. All right? It's about that. Now, these are 7 different things to improve your EQ. Respect differences. People are going to be different from you. Respect differences. Practice active listening. Practice active listening. Be genuinely interested in people. When you show that you are interested in people, people will be interested in you. Resolve conflicts. Never let conflicts fester. Improve your ability to communicate. Delay your response. You remember growing up ever hearing the words count to 10 before you say something back? Delay your response. And lastly, observe non-verbal behavior. These are the 7 things that we need to do. All right? And so we come to the close. I'd like to end with just sharing with you one story. There were 3 monks, a senior monk and 2 junior apprentice monks that were traveling on a long journey. And as they came to a crossing of a river, there was a lady there complaining. She was complaining because the river had risen in its depth where she couldn't cross the river. She couldn't cross the river and she was just complaining. So the senior monk went to her and said, "Climb on my back and I will carry you across." And she did. She climbed on his back, and all four of them, including the two junior monks, crossed the river. And they got to the other side. But when they got to the other side, this woman shoved the senior monk aside, got off him, did not even say the word thank you, and just sped off, to the shock and horror of the other two apprentice monks. But the senior monk didn't say a thing, he did not react, and he just continued his journey together with his two apprentice monks. An hour or 2 hours later, one of the monks said to him, "Master, I don't understand. Why did you help that lady? Our belief is that you shouldn't touch a lady. So why did you help her?" And the senior monk said, "The lady had a need and I simply helped her. That is all." And he stopped questioning. Another hour or two passed, and the second junior monk said, "Master, I don't understand how ungrateful that lady was. She didn't even say thank you. You carried her on your back all the way to the end, and she didn't even say a word." And the senior monk said, "I cannot control what a person says or what a person does. I have no control of that. I can only control what I say, what I do, and how I respond." Now, I stopped carrying that woman hours ago. Why are both of you still carrying that woman on your back? Thank you. I'd like to pass you back now to John and allow the session for Q&A to take place. John.
Thank you, Dr. Leslie. That was a very insightful sharing, and I already feel very motivated to complete my final year project. I'm so thankful for the message you shared. We've learned so much. And so now let's move on to the Q&A segment. So for those of you who haven't already gone to the Pigeonhole website, you can scan the QR code to submit your questions that you would like Dr. Leslie to answer. For those of you who do not have a QR code scanner, feel free to visit the website also on the slide and enter the password EQPower. So let's move on and start with the Q&A segment. So one of the most popular questions with 30 votes is how can a higher EQ be developed? Dr. Leslie, I remember that you mentioned something earlier on this. Could you elaborate on how will you answer this question?
As you know, I had a slide in there about 7 different ways in which you can improve your EQ. But I wanted to just focus in on 2. Number 1, the power of questions. Learn to be people that ask the right questions, because that will help you understand. And number 2, listen. Listen to people, not just with your ears, but also with your eyes. If we learn to do this, our EQ will go up, and our ability to understand, our ability to observe body language, our ability to understand where that person is coming from will increase, and therefore enable us to give the right response.
Thank you, Dr. Leslie, for that response. I think another popular question is, how do we deal with people with low EQ?
Well, you kill them. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. People with low EQ can be helped, can be influenced. And the thing is, you've heard the phrase, positive influences positive. When you have people that demonstrate low EQ, they need to have something that is completely opposite from them so that they can see a better way of responding, a better way of reacting, a better way of handling things. So the only thing I can tell you is to be that example. And if you are that example, then that person can change or be influenced to make that change.
I see, yes. So it seems that actually people have a lot of influence, and it's actually vice versa between each of us. Yeah, I think a good follow-up question, also quite popular, is how do we know if we have low EQ then?
Okay, that's a good one. That's a good one. How do you know if you're low EQ? I think the majority of people would know by three things. Number one, when you interact with anyone, and when I talk about anyone, I'm talking about your three main areas of spheres of contact: home, your friend, and people you have to deal with, lecturers, other colleagues who may not be your friends, etc., and other people you're engaging with. These three areas. How do people walk away from you? Do they walk away from you smiling? Do they walk away from you positive in that encounter? Do they walk away from you wanting to interact with you again? If the answer is yes to all those three, then you're a person that has high EQ. If the response to that is negative, people walk away from you frustrated, people walk from you angry, people walk away from you and say to themselves, if I can, I don't want to deal with you again. All right, then something's wrong. And you can't simply put the blame on that person. It says, it's that person's fault. We hold responsibility to any interaction. And it is our job to try and make sure that the outcome of that interaction is positive.
Thank you, Dr. Leslie. Yeah, that's very wise. I think another question that is quite well voted for is EQ more important than IQ in all situations?
I just want to touch on something before I answer that question directly. You can have high EQ, you can have high IQ and low EQ. You can have high IQ and average EQ. And you can have high IQ and high EQ. So you can have the spectrum of all of that. And then end of the day, when you're talking about is EQ more important? In a lot of senses, yes. Does that mean you can totally disregard IQ? You can't totally disregard IQ, but a person that has exercised good EQ will gain IQ of a certain level, right? Because you will be doing the things necessary. Now, you may not fit into the traditional book smart or have the necessary of what society deems people as high IQ. But because of your EQ, you will be accepted and realize that this person is street smart, this person is people smart, this person is situation smart, and therefore this person gets my vote. This person gets my endorsement. So in life, you have to move into EQ in order to succeed. If you don't consider EQ as part of your arsenal of dealing with people and dealing with situations, it will be a detriment to you succeeding in life.
I see. Yes. Thank you for the response, Dr. Leslie. I think another question that people are voting for is, does your family background and upbringing affect your EQ?
Definitely. Family backgrounds will definitely have to play on your EQ. It doesn't determine it, meaning that it doesn't mean that if you come from a very negative background, if you come from a background where everybody is shouting at each other, everybody's at each other's throat, that it will mean that is how you will end up, because you are still a person that makes decisions and makes a decision on how you want to react. Do you want to copy or do you want to be different? Do you want to respond in the same manner or do you want to respond in a completely different manner? But the sooner you realize that how you react to your family has an impact, the sooner you will come to realize that making those right emotional responses is something you have to do, irregardless or regardless of what your family does. Now, person that grows up in a very positive family background that endorses, that admonishes, that encourages, etc., will probably realize, hey, this is something that's good, and I'm going to do the same. So can it have a positive element on you? Yes. So, but at the end of the day, can a person come from a positive background and end up having very negative response to society? Yes. End of the day, they still need to make that decisions on how they want to respond. So yes, it does have an influence, but you make the final call and decision on what you want to take in and give out.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Leslie. I think another question that is quite interesting is EQ related to your language ability?
Language ability.
Yes.
Okay, not necessarily so. I have a friend of mine who speaks totally Singlish to the max. He cannot speak one single sentence that is not infused with Singlish. So people will laugh at his English. So if you say from a proper English standpoint, we talk about the Queen's English, cup of tea, kiss for the bride, tally ho and all that jazz. That's not him. But he speaks English, but he speaks it in such a way that he's a very influential person. He doesn't have proper language ability, and yet the manner in which he communicates to people he's interested, that he's sincere, and this is what he comes across as. So I don't see the direct correlation that says, oh, okay, if you don't speak well and you don't have good language ability, you're not going to have good EQ. No, I don't think that is a fair statement.
Thank you, Dr. Leslie. I think another question. How does EQ help me in my studies or learning in general? It's very applicable, very practical and applicable questions to the audience today.
Today in Poly, interactions among students is fundamental. You have projects, and your projects a lot of times are not individual projects. You're going to be working with other students. Interactions with your lecturers are fundamental. If you maintain a bad relationship with your colleagues, with your lecturers, do you think you will succeed? Will they give you a letter of recommendation? Will your lecturer give you a letter of recommendation? Will your lecturer give you the kind of response that you are looking for? Will the colleagues go out on a limb to help you when you need help? All of it comes back down to how you understand and react and behave on an EQ platform with them in the Poly. So yes, it is still something that has to be part of your arsenal. You need to learn this, and it will be the platform for your onward going success.
Thank you, Dr. Leslie. I think I really agree with the point you mentioned, because I remember during my internship, I had to forge good working relationships with my boss in order to get a letter of recommendation as well. Yes. I think another interesting question is, I guess it's a more practical question. What methods can be used to develop EQ today?
Goes back again to the slide that we're talking about, right? The 7 different ways. But again, as I mentioned to you, learning to understand yourself, taking and reading subject matters to help you understand, why did I say the things that I said? Why did I react? Reflecting on them. These are things that are very useful. And one of the best books around, Dale Carnegie's book on how to win and influence friends, is a fantastic book to teach you about the motivation side, the influencing side, and all of this can be very useful. So there are tons of good books out there. I will be offering one of the ebooks through the committee to anyone that wants one. But there are plenty of ebooks on EQ out there and that are free. But the principles, if you absorb it, will be something that will found or help the foundation of your success.
Thank you for the response. I think another question is, what can we do when others downplay EQ?
Sorry?
What can we do when others downplay EQ?
Downplay EQ.
Yes.
Okay, you can wish them the best and go to their funeral. No, I'm just kidding. No, if they downplay EQ, that's to their own detriment. As a friend, you would highlight that in a manner that is positive, not in a judgmental manner. But if you have the heart to help, then you can say something. If you want to help someone, you can and you should say something. But at the end of the day, it's their responsibility, it's their choice. If people don't want to take advice, if people don't want to change, people don't want to embrace EQ, there is nothing that you can do because it's a choice they make. So, and we have to live by our choices. Our choices will affect outcomes. And that is fact. All right? That is life. What you will reap, what you sow.
Thank you for the response, Dr. Leslie. I think, yes, this is quite an interesting question. What are your thoughts on emotions being ignored in organizational behavior? Example, the workplace or in team settings. Should they be ignored?
Sorry? What are? Say that.
What are your thoughts on emotions being ignored in organizational behavior?
Or being ignored.
Yes.
Okay. There's a philosophy or that I've learned in handling people in life, and that is you publicly praise and you privately admonish. So sometimes when a person emotionally has outbursts or inappropriate emotions are displayed, it may not be the right time to address it publicly or in that meeting. And you might want to take that on a separate basis and deal with that separately. But to completely ignore that will create a time bomb. If you just ignore it and just completely ignore it, do not address it even privately, you're going to create a situation where it will grow and grow and it will erupt as a bomb. So emotions do need to be handled. Where and when are two separate elements that need to be taken into consideration.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Leslie. I think we'll move on to the last question. Yes. So, what are your? I'm sorry. How do you know whether is it arrogance or self-confidence? Yeah. How do we know what is the difference between the two?
That's a good question. Very good question. I think confidence is where you have done enough either work, preparation, practice, all of that in order to give you a state of mind and heart that says, I believe I can handle this. That to me is confidence. Confidence comes from doing the necessary work. Arrogance believes that you can do it and you've not really put in all the work. You believe you can do it because you've got this high estimation of yourself and what you can do, but you've not necessarily done all the things and the steps you needed to take in order to give you confidence. And confidence is never necessarily a bragging element. It is, I like to look at confidence as being quiet. Quiet. That a person is quietly confident because they know they put in the work. They know they put in work. Okay, so I like to look at it as that being the difference. Arrogance seems to be boisterous in nature. Confidence seems to be quiet because you know you've done the necessary work to help you with the outcome.
Thank you, Dr. Leslie. That was a very insightful response. And I think that's all the time we have for the Q&A segment. Do you have any closing words for the audience today?
I want to encourage every one of you to basically learn to be people that ask questions, that listens with your eyes and with your ears, and get around people and friends that will help you to shape your journey in life so that you end up being the success you were meant to be. That is my wish and prayer for all of you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Leslie.